This will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order of the paper. Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day.
Orders of the day, private members' business. First, consideration at second reading of Bill C-240, an act to amend the Income Tax Act, tax credit first aid in the name of Mr. May, Cambridge.
Mr. May, Cambridge, seconded by Ms. César-Chavanne, moves that Bill C-240, an act to amend the income tax, tax credit first aid, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Finance. Debate, the Honourable Member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today it is my pleasure to rise in this House and speak to my private member's bill, an act to amend the Income Tax Act to provide a non-refundable tax credit for those who take first aid courses. I recognize well that my role is often to advocate for and represent my riding of Cambridge and North Dumfries. This is a role that I'm honoured and humbled to fulfill, and I thank the people of my riding for placing their trust in me. But private members' bills provide a unique and valuable opportunity to represent all Canadians. That's something that was foremost in my mind when I was designing my bill. I wanted to ensure that Canadian values and interests were inherent and that my bill would create a benefit which all Canadians could access equally. With my PMB, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to achieve a few broad goals. We need to start a national conversation in this country about emergency preparedness and getting ready for the demographic shifts which we know are approaching. The need for emergency preparedness has always been present in our society. However, with an aging population, Canadians need to be ready for more medical emergencies, more cardiac arrests, more strokes, and more falls. Mr. Speaker, the need for basic medical emergency preparedness in Canada is still growing, and this need has never been greater. In Canada, there is a heart attack every 12 minutes. A person experiencing cardiac arrest has their chance of survival increased exponentially if there is a first responder or similarly trained individual present. Unfortunately, in many cases of cardiac arrest, no one with this life-saving knowledge is nearby. Right now, more than half of adult Canadians live in a household in which no members have an up-to-date first aid or CPR certification. This reality is as dangerous as it is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker, particularly when the training is readily available. These Canadian households are not prepared for emergencies. They are at risk, and it is our moral duty to do whatever we can to help our citizens be better prepared. Mr. Speaker, this bill fills a void in our current legislative framework and our broader society. We know the training to prepare people for medical emergencies is there, and we know that it works. The only limitation is how many people in Canada have the training and the confidence to take action. This legislation is a measured response to the need for an incentive to encourage more Canadians to get trained. This bill is designed to provide a modest change, innovate within a sector, and improve lives in a measured and specific way. The bill has the potential to make a lasting impact on the lives of many Canadians without making a lasting impact on their wallets. It's designed to appeal broadly to those members of this House who consider themselves fiscally responsible, as the costs are reasonable. At the same time, its appeal is obvious to those members who seek an avenue for bettering people's lives and making our communities stronger, safer, and healthier. Mr. Speaker, I hope that my attempts to create this bill, however humble, will save lives and achieve far grander benefits than might otherwise be apparent. When someone undertakes first aid certification, what they're ultimately doing is gaining the skills and knowledge to serve their community at a personal cost. Perhaps even more important than the skills they're learning is the confidence that they're gaining in an emergency situation. They're in an emergency situation where literally every second counts. The confidence gained through these courses can be the difference between life and death. Undertaking first aid training and administering first aid are fundamentally selfless acts which benefit not only the individual citizen, but our communities as a whole. This House has the opportunity to recognize incentivize, and facilitate these selfless acts by reducing the costs incurred by these civic-minded individuals. That's something that all members should laud, appreciate, and promote. Mr. Speaker, with this private member's bill, I propose that our government should provide a tax credit to those who take an accredited first aid, CPR, or AED training course. This tax credit would be non-refundable and provide a deduction in the amount owing equal to the lowest federal income tax rate, currently at 15%. This tax credit would come at a relatively low cost to the government, but would make a difference in the affordability of life-saving training for individual Canadians. According to Ipsos Reid, only 18% of Canadians have an up-to-date certification, meaning they have passed a course in the last 3 years. That means approximately 1.8 million Canadians will take this life-saving training this year. At $15 per person, this bill will cost the government a maximum, and I will say that again, a maximum of $26.5 million this year. Compared to the value of the lives being saved, this is minuscule. Of course, not all course participants will be eligible for the tax credit, nor will they all owe taxes. And more than half of certified Canadians have their training financed by their workplace. When these facts are considered, we can see that the cost to the government will actually be much lower, likely less than $13 million. As I've said, Mr. Speaker, a great many Canadians are trained in life-saving first aid, CPR, and AED techniques through the generosity of their employers. This generosity is to be commended. These employers recognize the value of having certified employees in their workplace. Employers who pay for their employees' training are not eligible for the tax credit because they already receive tax incentives when they claim it as a business expense. Similarly, the employee cannot claim the cost of a course at their employer, a course that their employer has paid for. For many Canadians, however, this type of training is not available at their workplace. Many of these people are still interested in the training, and frankly, society would be greatly benefited from them having this training. First aid training is life-saving, Mr. Speaker. And my hope is that by making first aid courses more financially accessible, Canada will have more citizens with these life-saving skills. Having more people with first aid training increases the likelihood of trained individuals being at hand during an emergency. 1/3 of Canadians have never taken a first aid, CPR, or AED training course. This is a huge life-saving resource that we aren't accessing as a culture, but we should be. Helping Canadians gain the skill to treat medical emergencies out of hospital also has the potential to result in cost savings to the healthcare system by giving individuals the skills to better respond to minor situations such as cuts and scrapes, and the knowledge and confidence to help minimize the damage sustained in the case of more substantive injuries. For someone who breaks a bone, for example, knowing how to place a splint could have a major impact on their recovery time and the costs associated with it. For someone having a seizure, a passerby with the knowledge of rescue treatments, how to give care and comfort first aid, and when to call for emergency help could prevent injuries and keep many Canadians safe. It's my hope that Canadians would take advantage of this modest tax credit to gain the skills that might allow them to save lives, prevent injuries, and help keep their neighbours and families safe. Mr. Speaker, I know that I'm not the only member of Parliament for whom safeguarding our well-being of Canadians is of the utmost priority. The member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston has made it his personal mission over the past number of years to increase the number of automatic external defibrillators in his riding, and has campaigned for greater access to these devices all across Canada. An AED is a small portable device used to deliver a shock to correct abnormal beating of the heart. These AEDs, when kept in public spaces, are an incredible asset to the safety of those around them. Every police cruiser in Ottawa has one of these devices, Mr. Speaker, and it has directly resulted in around 10 lives saved every single year. Every workplace under federal jurisdiction is required to have first aid kits for this same reason. But we need to ensure that there are hands capable of wielding these tools so that they can be effective at saving lives. Mr. Speaker, my background, I used to work before working in this House as an employee with the YMCA for many, many years. And I remember as the director of the YMCA, about 10 years ago, my boss came to me and said, "Brian, we want you to become a lifeguard." My first response was, "Why?" At 30 years old, why was this something that was important? Well, I'm very glad for the opportunity to do that, although it was incredibly humbling, Mr. Speaker, at 30 years old to be taking life-saving training with a number of 16-year-olds. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, this first aid training has made me confident that in the face of any emergency, I'll be able to safeguard the lives and well-being of my neighbors, my family, and my colleagues. It's my hope to spread that kind of knowledge and confidence within Canada. Mr. Speaker, I've been asking for support for this bill for the past few months. In fact, I've been nagging people, I think, to a certain extent, and sending them video emails and those sorts of things. And I've risen here today in this House to debate it and ask for the support of all members. I ask for this support for the sake of the well-being of our communities. This House has the opportunity to safeguard the lives of Canadians and display our commitment to emergency preparedness. I am confident that the House will appreciate the impact of this legislation on the lives and safety of ordinary families. My hope is that my bill passes second reading and goes to committee, where I'm open to any recommendations to make this bill better. Mr. Speaker, thank you for your support on this issue, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and answering any questions from the House. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. La députée de Charlebourg.
Honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou.